Felthara stepped off the transport ship and onto the metal platform of Nexus Prime Station. Her forearms carried her equipment bags with practiced ease. She had fought in 37 battles across the galaxy. She knew what to expect from coalition forces. The Zenthari were slow but steady. The Quillians were smart with technology. The Rockborn were tough and never gave up. She understood how to work with all of them. The station buzzed with activity. Ships came and went constantly. Soldiers from different worlds walked through the corridors. Belthara made her way to the briefing room. Her orders said she would join Joint Strike Team 7 for a critical mission. She expected to see familiar faces from familiar species. When she entered the briefing room, she stopped. Half the team was made up of creatures she had never seen before. They stood about as tall as her shoulder. Their skin was soft-looking, without natural armor or scales. They had only 2 arms and 2 legs. Most strange of all, they had small eyes and tiny teeth. They looked weak. Velthara of the Catherian Defense Corps, announced the station commander. Meet your new teammates. A human stepped forward. He was older than the others, with gray hair and calm eyes. Captain Donghyun Park, Coalition Forces, these are my people. He pointed to each human in turn. Sergeant Minho Kim, my second in command. Specialist Jiwon Lee, our tech expert. Private Seung-ho Choi, our newest member. Dr. Hyunwoo Song, our medic. Belthara studied them carefully. In her experience, new species in the coalition were usually impressive in some way. The Zenthari were 8 feet tall with thick armor plates. The Quillians had advanced weapons that could cut through anything. The Rockborn could survive in space without suits. These humans looked like they would break if she touched them too hard. What are your people's strengths in combat? She asked. Captain, Park smiled. We adapt well to new situations. That was not a real answer. Belthara felt worried. The mission briefing was about to begin, and she would have to trust these weak-looking creatures with her life. The briefing hologram showed a dead world called Carthon. The surface was covered in dust storms and poisonous gas. Below the surface was something much worse. The Vexhi had built their largest breeding facility there. The Vexhi were the Coalition's worst enemy. They looked like giant insects with razor-sharp claws and acid spit. They attacked in huge groups and never stopped fighting until they were all dead. Intelligence reports show 50,000 Vexhi drones protecting the facility, the briefing officer explained. Multiple queen castes are directing their defense. The underground hive network spans 300 kilometers. Belthara felt her stomach drop. 50,000 enemies. Most coalition attacks on Vexhi hives used orbital bombardment with thousands of soldiers. Joint Strike Team 7 had only 12 members total. Our mission is to infiltrate the breeding facility and plant seismic charges, Captain Park said. We destroy the charges from inside, collapse the hive network, and eliminate their breeding capability in this sector. How do we get past 50,000 drones? Asked one of the Zenthari team members. Stealth and speed, Park replied. We go in during a dust storm. Plant the charges before they know we're there. Get out fast. Belthara had been on stealth missions before. They required perfect timing and no mistakes. One wrong move and the entire team would be surrounded and killed. She looked at the humans again. They seemed calm about the whole thing. Too calm. What weapons do your people use? She asked. Sergeant Minho Kim opened the equipment case. Inside were metal weapons that looked ancient. Kinetic projectile rifles, he said. Chemical explosives. Steel blades. Belthara stared. Those are primitive weapons. Vexahi carapaces can deflect plasma bursts. How will metal bullets hurt them? Different. Problems need different solutions, Kim replied. Dr. Hyunwoo Song pulled out a medical kit. It was twice the size of normal medic equipment. I also carry biological analysis tools, he said. It helps to understand what we're fighting. Specialist Jiwon Lee showed her communication gear. I can hack into Vexhi bio networks, she said. Confuse their coordination signals. Private Seung-ho Choi was checking his rifle for the 5th time. He looked nervous, but his movements were precise. Every part of his weapon was cleaned and ready. Velthara noticed something odd. While other coalition species prepared by reviewing tactical plans or checking equipment once, the humans kept working on their gear. They cleaned weapons that were already clean. They checked equipment that had already been checked. They moved, with quiet efficiency, but never seemed satisfied that everything was perfect. "Why do you keep checking the same things?" she asked. "Because our equipment has to work perfectly when we need it," Park said. "We don't get second chances." The final briefing included detailed maps of the hive structure. The breeding queens lived in the deepest chambers protected by thousands of drones. The seismic charges had to be placed at specific points to make the whole structure collapse. The team would have 6 hours to complete the mission before the dust storm ended and they lost their cover. "Questions?" Park asked. "What happens if we encounter more resistance than expected?" asked a Quillian team member. "We adapt," Park said. "What? If the stealth approach fails?" "We adapt." "What if we get separated in the hive tunnels?" "We adapt." Velthara was getting annoyed. Adapt is not a tactical plan. What specific actions will you take in each situation? Park looked at her with those calm eyes. "We'll figure it out when it happens." This was not how professional soldiers talked. Professional soldiers had backup plans and emergency procedures. They knew exactly what to do in every possible situation. These humans seemed to be planning to make it up as they went along. The briefing ended. The team had 12 hours before departure. Velthara went to the station's database and looked up information about humans. What she found made her more worried. Humans came from a planet called Earth. Their world was covered with predators that tried to eat them. Natural disasters happened all the time. Disease killed millions of them regularly. According to the files, humans had spent most of their history fighting wars against each other. They had developed thousands of different ways to kill other humans. But the files also said humans were one of the few species that kept fighting, even when they were badly injured. Most intelligent species would surrender or retreat when facing impossible odds. Humans would keep attacking until they were physically unable to move. Velthara found this information disturbing. She had fought alongside many brave species, but there was a difference between bravery and refusing to recognize when a fight was hopeless. She went to the observation deck and watched the humans prepare for the mission. They worked together smoothly, but something felt wrong. When other species prepared for dangerous missions, they showed fear or excitement or determination. The humans showed nothing. They were as calm as if they were preparing for a routine training exercise. Sergeant Kim was teaching Private Choi how to use explosives in confined spaces. Dr. Song was mixing chemicals that Velthara didn't recognize. Specialist Lee was programming something into her communication equipment. Captain Park was studying the hive maps, but he wasn't taking notes or making backup plans. He was just looking. 6 hours before departure, Velthara made a decision. She approached Captain Park. "I need to know," she said. "Have your people ever fought Vexi before?" "No," Park said. "This will be our first time." "Then how do you know your weapons will work against them?" Park smiled again. It was not a happy smile. "We've fought things like them before. On our world, we learned that everything has weaknesses. You just have to find them. What if you can't find them in time? Then we make new weaknesses." Velthara stared at him. That was not how combat worked. You couldn't just create weaknesses in enemy armor or biological systems, but Park spoke like it was obvious. As departure time approached, Velthara felt a growing sense of unease. She was about to go into combat with the most dangerous enemies in known space, alongside allies she didn't understand. The humans were either completely insane, or they knew something about warfare that no other species had figured out. Either way, she was about to find out which one was true. The stealth pods launched from the coalition ship during the height of the dust storm. Velthara was crammed into a metal box barely large enough for her body. The pod shook violently as it fell through Carthon's poisonous atmosphere. Outside, wind speeds reached 300 kilometers per hour. The storm should hide their approach from Vexi sensors. Should was the important word. Velthara's pod hit the ground hard. Her safety harness kept her from being thrown around, but she still felt like she had been punched by a rock-born warrior. She activated her suit's external sensors and scanned the area. The dust was so thick she could barely see 10 meters in any direction. Her communication system crackled to life. "Sound off," came Captain Park's voice. "Team leaders report." "Zenthari team operational," reported their squad leader. "Quillian team ready," came the next voice. "Rockborn team functional," said the third. "Catherian warrior ready," Velthara replied. "Human team ready to proceed," Park said. Velthara used her suit's navigation system to locate the hive entrance. It was supposed to be 2 kilometers north of their landing zone. She activated her stealth systems and began moving through the dust storm. The other team members appeared on her tactical display as moving dots. Everything went wrong after 15 minutes. HFY patrol drones came out of nowhere. The creatures were the size of hover cars, with 6 legs and mandibles that could cut through metal. Their biosensors should not have been able to detect the team through the storm, but somehow they knew exactly where to look. "Contact front," shouted the Zenthari team leader. "Multiple hostiles approaching." Velthara saw them through the dust. At least 20 patrol drones were moving toward their position. More were coming from other directions. The stealth mission had just become a fighting retreat. "All teams, defensive positions," Park ordered. "We fight our way to the hive entrance." The Zenthari took cover behind rocks and started firing their plasma rifles. The energy beams cut through the dust, leaving glowing trails in the air. The Quillian team activated their shield generators and advanced slowly. The Rockborn simply started walking toward the enemy, ignoring the claws and acid spit coming their way. Velthara expected the humans to take cover like sensible soldiers. Instead, she watched something that made no sense. The humans became calmer. Private. Sungho Choi had been nervous during the entire preparation phase. Now, with giant alien monsters trying to kill him, he was steady as stone. His rifle fired in controlled bursts. Each shot hit exactly where he aimed. When one drone got close, he switched to his sidearm without panic. When that ran out of bullets, he drew a knife and kept fighting. Dr. Hyunwoo Song was treating a wounded Quillian soldier while shooting at drones with his other hand. He never looked away from his patient, but his shots still found their targets. When the soldier was stable, Song injected himself with something from his medical kit. His movements became faster and more precise. Sergeant Minho Kim was doing something Velthara had never seen before. He was using the drone's size against them. Instead of trying to stay away from their claws, he was getting closer. He would duck under a drone's attack, place an explosive charge on its belly, and roll away before it exploded. He did this 5 times in 2 minutes. Specialist Jiwon Lee was working with her communication equipment while the battle raged around her. Suddenly, 3 of the attacking drones stopped moving. They turned and started attacking their own teammates. "Bio-network hacking successful," she reported calmly. Captain Park was coordinating the entire team's movements. But he wasn't giving detailed orders like other commanders. He would point at a drone and nod. Kim would immediately move to attack it. He would make a hand signal to Lee, and she would redirect her hacked drones to help the Zenthari team. The humans seemed to read each other's minds. The strangest part was their weapons. Velthara had thought the human guns were too primitive to hurt HFY drones. She was wrong. The metal bullets punched right through drone armor that deflected plasma beams. The explosive rounds didn't just damage the creatures, they created loud noises and bright flashes that seemed to confuse the other drones. "How are your weapons so effective?" she asked Kim during a brief pause in the fighting. "HFY armor evolved to stop energy weapons," he replied while reloading. "Nobody shoots bullets at them anymore, so they don't have defenses against kinetic impact." That was tactics on a level Velthara had never considered. The humans had studied their enemies' defenses and chosen weapons specifically to bypass them. But how had they known what would work if they had never fought HFY before? More drones appeared. The team was getting surrounded. Standard coalition doctrine said to call for orbital support and retreat to a safe distance. Park made a different decision. "All teams advance to the hive entrance," he ordered. "We go through them." "Sir, we should pull back," the Zenthari team leader argued. "We're outnumbered." "Numbers don't matter if we don't let them surround us," Park replied. "Stay mobile, keep moving forward." The humans started moving toward the largest group of drones. This was completely insane. But the other teams followed them because Park's calm confidence was somehow reassuring. What happened next changed everything Velthera thought she knew about combat. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like they had been designed, specifically to kill these creatures. Every movement was efficient. Every action had a purpose. They wasted no energy on anything that didn't help them win. When Dr. Song ran out of ammunition, he grabbed a severed drone claw and started using it as a weapon. When Specialist Lee's equipment was damaged, she ripped biosensors out of a dead drone and connected them to her suit. The humans adapted their tactics in real time based on what they learned about their enemies. But the most disturbing thing was how they communicated. Other species needed to speak to coordinate their actions. The humans barely said anything. They would look at each other and somehow know exactly what the other person was planning. Captain Park would raise his hand slightly, and Sergeant Kim would immediately move to flank an enemy. Private Choi would tap his helmet twice and Dr. Song would throw him a medical stimulant. They reached the hive entrance after 30 minutes of constant fighting. The massive organic opening led down into darkness. Bioluminescent growths provided dim light in the tunnel system. The air coming out of the hive smelled like decay and acid. Casualties report, Park ordered. 2 Zenthari wounded, not serious, came the first report. 1 Quillian injured, can continue, said the second. Rockborn team undamaged, reported the third. Catherian warrior operational, Velthera said. She had taken some minor cuts from drone claws, but nothing her suit couldn't handle. Human team ready to proceed, Park said. But Velthara noticed that Private Choi was favoring his left arm, and Dr. Song had blood on his uniform. They were injured, but not reporting it. Your people are hurt, she pointed out. We're functional, Park replied. That's what matters. The team entered the hive. The organic walls pulsed with a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. The tunnels branched off in multiple directions. According to the mission briefings, the breeding chambers were at the bottom level, 5 kilometers down through a maze of passages. Velthara activated her bioscanner. The readings showed thousands of life signs throughout the hive structure. Most were small drones, but there were larger signatures deeper down. The queens were waiting for them. Stealth mode from here, Park ordered. Stay quiet. Stay together. The team moved through the tunnels carefully. The walls were covered with a sticky substance that muffled their footsteps. Strange organic structures hung from the ceiling, dripping acidic fluid. Everything in the hive seemed designed to kill intruders. They had gone maybe half a kilometer when they encountered the first guard post. A dozen worker drones were building some kind of barrier across the tunnel. Beyond them, Velthara could see the passage branching into 3 directions. The standard approach would be to use stunners to disable the workers silently, then proceed down the correct tunnel. The humans chose a different approach. Sergeant Kim hand-signaled to the others. Without any discussion, Dr. Song pulled out a device that looked like a medical injector. He aimed it at one of the worker drones and fired. The creature immediately stopped working and began attacking its teammates. While the workers fought each other, Specialist Lee activated some kind of pheromone generator. The confused drones started following her signals instead of their original programming. Within minutes, the entire guard post was under human control. How did you know how to do that? Velthera asked. We studied the biological samples from previous Vex-High encounters, Dr. Song explained. Their command structure is based on chemical signals. Once you understand the chemistry, you can manipulate it. Velthara stared at him. The coalition had been fighting Vex-High for decades. Military scientists from dozens of species had studied them. Nobody had ever figured out how to turn their biochemistry against them. These humans had done it in the few weeks since first contact. The team proceeded deeper into the hive. But Velthara found herself watching the humans more than looking for enemies. She was beginning to understand that she wasn't just fighting alongside a new species. She was witnessing something unprecedented in the galaxy. These creatures called humans didn't just fight wars. They solved them. 3 levels down into the hive, the walls began to change. The organic passages became wider and more complex. Bioluminescent veins pulsed with brighter light. The air grew thicker and harder to breathe. Velthera's suit sensors detected increasing levels of pheromones and chemical signals. They were getting close to the command levels where the queens lived. The first queen chamber appeared without warning. The tunnel opened into a vast space that stretched beyond the range of their lights. In the center sat something that made Velthara's blood freeze. The creature was as large as a building, with a bloated egg-producing section and multiple sets of arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Her head moved constantly, tracking dozens of different scent trails and monitoring the activities of hundreds of worker drones. This was a Vex-High queen. Intelligence reports said queens were nearly impossible to kill. Their thick carapaces could stop tank rounds. Their acid spit could melt through battle armor in seconds. Most dangerous of all, they could coordinate thousands of drones through pheromone commands. A single queen could direct an entire battle across multiple star systems. Coalition doctrine was clear about encountering queens: retreat immediately and call for orbital bombardment. No ground force had ever successfully killed a queen without massive casualties and heavy weapons support. Captain Park studied the creature for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned to his team and began giving orders in calm, quiet tones. Kim, explosives on the support pillars. Lee, find her communication nodes and jam them. Song, prepare bioweapons. Choi, covering fire on my signal. Velthara grabbed his arm. Captain, we need to retreat. Queens are too dangerous for a small team to engage. Park looked at her with those steady eyes. The mission requires us to eliminate breeding capability. That includes queens. Sir, with respect, your species has never fought a queen before. You don't understand what they're capable of. Then we'll learn, Park said simply. Before Velthara could argue further, the humans began moving, not toward cover or escape routes, but directly toward the queen. This was suicide. She was about to watch 5 brave but foolish creatures get themselves killed through inexperience. What she saw instead changed everything she believed about combat. The humans didn't attack the queen like normal soldiers would. They attacked like they had studied this exact creature for months and developed specific tactics to defeat it. Every movement was calculated. Every action served multiple purposes. Sergeant Kim didn't try to shoot the queen directly. Instead, he moved to the organic pillars that supported the chamber roof. His explosives were placed at precise points that would cause maximum structural damage. When the queen noticed him and spat acid in his direction, he was already gone. Doctor. Song wasn't using normal weapons either. He had prepared some kind of biological agent that he fired at the queen in aerosol form. When it hit her, she began making distressed sounds and her movements became less coordinated. Specialist Lee was doing something with her equipment that made the queen's head jerk around in confusion. The constant stream of pheromone commands she had been sending to her drones became chaotic. Some drones stopped moving entirely. Others began attacking their neighbors. Private Choi was providing covering fire, but not at the queen. He was shooting at specific points on the chamber walls, where Velthara could see clusters of biosensors. Each shot destroyed another piece of the queen's ability to monitor her territory. Captain Park was coordinating all of this while moving in a pattern that seemed random, but somehow kept him away from the queen's attacks. When she swung her massive claws at him, he was never quite where she expected. When she spat acid, it hit empty air. The most disturbing part was how calm they remained. The queen was screaming in rage and pain, filling the chamber with sounds that made Velthara's ears hurt. Acid was splashing everywhere, burning holes in the organic floor. The other coalition team members were taking cover and trying to stay out of the way. The humans acted like this was a routine training exercise. Her left rear segment is vulnerable, Dr. Song called out while dodging a claw swipe. Chemical analysis shows weaker carapace structure. Confirmed, Kim replied, while placing another explosive charge. Preparing focused assault on weak point. Pheromone. Jammers are working, Lee reported. Her command effectiveness is down to 30%. They were analyzing the queen's weaknesses in real time and adapting their tactics accordingly. This should have been impossible. Queens were supposed to be too dangerous to study during combat. But the humans were treating her like a puzzle to be solved rather than a monster to be feared. The queen realized she was losing. She released. a distress call that echoed through the entire hive structure. This was the chemical signal that would bring every drone within kilometers rushing to defend her. The chamber would soon be flooded with enemies. Distress pheromones detected, Lee announced. We have maybe 2 minutes before massive reinforcements arrive. Park nodded. Execute final phase. What happened next was the most precisely coordinated violence Velthara had ever witnessed. All 5 humans moved simultaneously toward different points around the Queen. Kim's explosives detonated in perfect sequence, weakening the creature's support structure. Song's biological weapons attacked her nervous system. Lee's jammers disrupted her ability to call for help. Choi's covering fire kept her from focusing on any single attacker. Park himself ran directly at the Queen's head. This was suicide. Even if the others had weakened her, she still had claws that could cut him in half with one swipe. Instead of trying to avoid her attacks, Park seemed to predict them. When she swung her right claw, he dove under it. When she tried to bite him, he rolled aside. When she spat acid, he was already moving to his next position. He moved like he could see the future. He reached her head and placed a small device against her skull. When it activated, the Queen's movements became slow and clumsy. Her eyes lost focus. The constant stream of commands she had been sending stopped entirely. Neural disruptor in place, Park reported. Queen is neutralized. The massive creature toppled backward with a sound like a falling tree. Her legs twitched a few times, then went still. The most dangerous type of Vexhi in known space was dead. The entire fight had taken less than 4 minutes. Velthara stared at the dead Queen, then at the humans. They were already checking their equipment and preparing to move on. No celebration. No relief at surviving an impossible battle. Just professional efficiency. How? She asked. How what? Park replied while reloading his weapon. How did you know how to kill her? Your species has never encountered queens before, Dr. Song answered while collecting biological samples. We studied the intelligence reports from every species that had fought them. We analyzed their physiology, their behavior, patterns, their chemical systems. We identified probable weaknesses and developed tactics to exploit them. But you couldn't test those tactics. You had no way to know if they would work. Sergeant Kim looked up from checking his explosives. That's why we brought backup plans. If the first approach failed, we would try the second. If that failed, we had a third option. What was your backup plan? Velthara asked. The humans looked at each other. Captain Park answered with that calm expression that was starting to frighten her. We would have improvised. The sound of approaching drones echoed through the tunnels. Hundreds of them were converging on the Queen's chamber. In any normal situation, this would mean immediate retreat. The team had completed one objective, but the main mission was still ahead of them. The breeding chambers were deeper in the hive. Sir, the Zenthari team leader called out. Massive enemy response incoming. Recommend immediate extraction. Park looked at his tactical display. The screen showed red dots approaching from every direction. There were too many to count. Negative, he said. We proceed to the primary objectives. Captain, we'll be completely surrounded, Velthara pointed out. Good, Park replied. That means we know where all the enemies are. Velthara stared at him. That was not how tactical thinking worked. Being surrounded was bad. Having more enemies than you could count was bad. Fighting in an enclosed space with limited escape routes was bad. But as the first wave of drones entered the chamber, she saw something that made her question everything she had learned about warfare. The humans weren't preparing to fight desperately for their lives. They were preparing to hunt. Dr. Song was mixing chemicals that would affect drone behavior. Specialist Lee was programming her equipment to disrupt their coordination. Sergeant Kim was placing explosives that would channel the enemy into kill zones. Private Choi was checking his weapons with the same calm efficiency he had shown during preparation. Captain Park was studying the approaching enemies with the expression of someone solving an interesting problem. When he looked at the swarm of deadly creatures rushing toward them, he didn't see a threat. He saw an opportunity. All teams prepare for sustained engagement, he ordered. We're going to have to fight our way through them. As the first drones reached the chamber, Velthara realized she was about to witness something unprecedented. These humans weren't just going to fight impossible odds, they were going to enjoy it. The first wave of drones flooded into the chamber like a living tide. Velthera counted at least 200 creatures in the initial assault, with more coming behind them. The chittering sound of their claws on the organic floor was deafening. Their mandibles clicked in excited anticipation of fresh prey. Any sensible military force would have been overwhelmed in seconds. The coalition teams took defensive positions and prepared to sell their lives dearly. The Zenthari activated their personal shields. The Quillians began charging their most powerful weapons. The Rockborn simply stood ready to fight until they couldn't fight anymore. The humans began to sing. It started low, almost under the sound of the approaching swarm. Captain Park was humming something that sounded like an old military march. Sergeant Kim picked up the melody. Dr. Song added harmony while preparing his medical equipment. Even Private Choi joined in, his voice steady despite the terror approaching. They were singing while facing certain death. This was beyond bravery. This was something else entirely. "What are you doing?" Velthara shouted over the noise of the swarm. "Staying coordinated," Park replied calmly, never stopping his humming. The first drones reached their position. What happened next destroyed every assumption Velthara had about warfare, tactics, and survival instincts. The humans became something different. They didn't fight like soldiers anymore. They didn't even fight like the efficient killers she had observed earlier. They fought like they had been designed by evolution specifically to destroy these creatures. Every movement was perfect. Every shot found its target. Every tactic worked exactly as planned. But more than that, they adapted their methods in real time as they learned about their enemies. When the first drones proved vulnerable to kinetic weapons, the humans immediately shared this information. When Dr. Song discovered that drone blood was acidic enough to be weaponized, he started coating their bullets with it. When Specialist Lee found that drone biosensors were sensitive to specific radio frequencies, she began broadcasting signals that made them attack each other. They were learning and evolving their tactics faster than their enemies could respond. Sergeant Kim was doing something that made no tactical sense but somehow worked perfectly. When his rifle ammunition ran low, instead of conserving shots, he deliberately let drones get close enough to grab him. As they reached for him with their claws, he would detonate small explosives that killed multiple enemies at once. He was using himself as bait in a trap that reset itself every few seconds. Dr. Song was operating on a level that transcended normal medical training. He would inject wounded team members with stimulants that should have killed them, but somehow made them fight better instead. When his own medical supplies ran low, he started harvesting chemicals from dead drones and synthesizing new medicines on the battlefield. Specialist Lee had turned her communication equipment into a weapon. She was broadcasting fake pheromone signals that confused entire groups of drones. Some would stop fighting and start building nests. Others would begin mating behaviors in the middle of combat. She was rewriting their biological programming while the battle raged around her. Private Choi was demonstrating why the humans' primitive weapons were actually superior. His kinetic rifle could punch through drone armor that deflected energy weapons. When that ran out of ammunition, he switched to explosive rounds that created psychological terror among creatures that didn't understand the concept of fear. When those were gone, he drew a knife and kept fighting. But Captain Park was the most disturbing to watch. He moved through the battlefield like he could predict the future. When a drone attacked from his left, he was already turning right. When spit flew toward his position, he had moved before it was fired. He fought like someone who had studied these creatures for years and knew their every behavioral pattern. The singing never stopped. Even as they killed and adapted and improvised new forms of violence, the humans maintained perfect harmony. The melody helped them coordinate without speaking. It also seemed to unnerve the drones. Creatures that had never shown fear in thousands of years of warfare began hesitating when they heard it. "They're afraid of you," Velthara realized, speaking to Park during a brief pause in the fighting. "Good," he replied while reloading. "Fear makes enemies predictable. But they're vex high. They don't feel fear." "Everything feels fear when it meets something it can't understand," Park said. "We're just something new." More drones poured into the chamber. The tactical situation was hopeless by any reasonable measure. The team was surrounded, outnumbered, and running low on ammunition. The hive's biosensors had identified their location and were directing every available defender toward them. Instead of despair, Velthara saw anticipation in the humans' faces. They had been hoping for exactly this scenario. "All teams prepare for tunnel fighting," Park ordered. "We advance to the lower levels." "Sir, there are thousands of enemies between us and the breeding chambers," the Zenthari team leader protested. "Then, we'll have to go through thousands of enemies," Park replied. The humans began implementing tactics that no civilized species would consider. They collapsed sections of tunnel to create choke points, even though this trapped them deeper in the hive. They used explosive charges to seal off escape routes, forcing the drones to attack from predictable directions. They turned the hive's own structure into a weapon against its defenders. Most disturbing was how they coordinated damage across the team. When Private Choi's leg was badly injured by drone claws, the others immediately adjusted their formation to protect him. But they didn't slow down or change their tactics. They simply incorporated his injury into their battle plan. When Dr. Song was wounded by acid spit, he injected himself with something from his medical kit that made his wounds stop bleeding and his reflexes speed up. He continued fighting while his body literally repaired itself during combat. When Sergeant Kim's rifle was damaged, he picked up weapons from fallen drones and learned to use them in seconds. When those broke, he started ripping claws and mandibles from corpses to use as bladed weapons. They weren't just adapting to the situation. They were evolving in real time, becoming more dangerous with every passing minute. "How is this possible?" Velthara asked Dr. Song while he was treating her injuries. "What do you mean?" he replied while simultaneously shooting at attacking drones with his free hand. "Your people are getting better at fighting the longer the battle continues. That's not normal." Song smiled while injecting her with something that made her wounds stop hurting. "Humans learn from stress. The more dangerous the situation, the faster we adapt. It's how our species survived on Earth." "What kind of world did you come from that made you like this?" "A world that was trying to kill us every single day," Song said. "Everything on Earth wanted to eat us, poison us, or crush us. We learned to see every threat as a learning opportunity." The battle continued for hours. Wave after wave of drones attacked the team's position. The humans killed them all. Not just killed them, but learned from each encounter and became more efficient at killing the next wave. By the time they reached the tunnel leading to the lower levels, Velthara realized something that chilled her to the core. The humans weren't fighting for survival anymore. They weren't even fighting to complete the mission. They were fighting because they had found something they were good at, something they enjoyed, something that challenged them to become better than they had been moments before. The drones were no longer attacking prey. They were feeding data to predators who used every piece of information to become more lethal. As the team descended toward the breeding chambers, Velthara found herself wondering what would happen when the galaxy realized what these creatures, called humans, were truly capable of. The coalition had gained powerful allies, but she was beginning to suspect they had also unleashed something that would change warfare across the known universe. The humans didn't just win battles, they evolved, beyond the need to fight them. The seismic charges were in place. The mission objectives had been completed. According to standard coalition protocol, the team should begin immediate extraction. They had planted explosives at 12 critical points throughout the hive structure. When detonated, the charges would collapse the entire underground network and destroy the largest Vexhi breeding facility in known space. Captain Park was studying his tactical display when Dr. Song approached with new information. "Captain, my bioscanners are detecting something the intelligence reports missed," Song said quietly. "There's a deeper level below the breeding chambers. Massive heat signatures and unusual chemical readings." Park examined the data. "How massive?" 12 distinct life signs, each roughly 10 times larger than the queen we eliminated, plus approximately 50,000 smaller readings that appear to be egg clusters. Velthara felt her blood freeze. 12 creatures larger than queens could only mean one thing. "Those are prime queens," she whispered. "Intelligence said they were theoretical. We've never confirmed their existence." "What are prime queens?" Park asked. The next stage of VexHi evolution, queens that coordinate other queens. If they exist, they represent generational improvement in VexHi capabilities. One prime queen could direct breeding programs across entire star systems. Park was quiet for several seconds, processing this information. The logical decision was obvious. The mission was complete. Destroying the known breeding chambers would cripple VexHi expansion in this sector. Discovering previously unknown prime queens was valuable intelligence that should be reported to Coalition Command. We proceed to the lower level, Park announced. Every member of the team stared at him. Even the other humans looked surprised. Sir, Sergeant Kim said carefully, our ammunition is down to 30%. Medical supplies are nearly exhausted. The team has taken significant casualties. Standard doctrine recommends extraction. Standard doctrine didn't account for prime queens, Park replied. If we leave them alive, they'll rebuild everything we've destroyed within a year. Plus, they'll adapt their defenses based on what we've shown them today. Captain, Velthara interrupted, prime queens are beyond dangerous. Coalition scientists theorize they might possess near-sapient intelligence. Fighting one would require a full battle fleet. Fighting 12 is impossible. Park looked at her with that calm expression she was beginning to dread. Impossible is just another word for untested tactics. The Zenthari team leader stepped forward. Sir, with respect, this is suicide. We should extract, report our findings, and return with proper forces. By the time proper forces arrive, the prime queens will have relocated, Park said. This is our only chance to eliminate them. The other coalition members began discussing the tactical situation in urgent whispers. The Quillians were calculating probability matrices that showed 0 chance of success. The Rockborn were expressing doubt about the wisdom of continuing. Even the usually brave Zenthari were questioning the mission parameters. The humans were checking their equipment with renewed efficiency. Song, what medical supplies do we have left? Park asked. Enough for basic treatment of current injuries, plus the experimental compounds I've synthesized from VexHi biology. Kim, ammunition status? 30% conventional rounds, 60% on explosives. I can make more from hive materials if needed. Lee, communication and jamming capabilities? Full. Spectrum available. I've learned enough about their bio-networks to disrupt coordination for brief periods. Choi, how's your leg? Functional for combat, sir. Velthara watched this exchange with growing horror. The humans were actually planning to assault 12. Prime queens with minimal supplies, significant injuries, and no backup. This went beyond bravery or dedication to mission completion. This was clinical insanity. Park, listen to me, she said urgently. I've fought VexHi for 20 years. What you're proposing is not just dangerous, it's impossible. Prime queens will have adapted based on everything we've shown them. They'll be prepared for our tactics. Then we'll show them new tactics, Park replied simply. The team descended to the lowest level of the hive. The organic tunnels here were different from anything they had encountered. The walls pulsed with complex patterns of bioluminescence. The air was thick with pheromones that made Velthara's sensors malfunction. Strange growths covered every surface, secreting chemicals that her suit identified as unknown compounds. This is a completely different ecosystem, Dr. Song observed, while taking readings. The biochemistry here is more advanced than anything in the upper levels. Evolutionary laboratory, Specialist Lee added. They're not just breeding standard drones down here. They're creating new variants. The chamber that held the prime queens was beyond anything in Velthara's experience. It stretched for kilometers in every direction. Organic spires reached from floor to ceiling, connected by bridges of living tissue. Pools of glowing liquid dotted the landscape, and everywhere, as far as their lights could reach, were eggs. Thousands upon thousands of eggs. But these weren't the standard VexHi drone eggs from the upper levels. These were larger, more complex, with visible neural development patterns. They're breeding a new generation, Velthara whispered. Not just more of the same drones. Smarter ones. Better ones. In the center of the chamber, 12 massive forms moved with slow, deliberate grace. The prime queens were even larger than the intelligence estimates had suggested. Each one was the size of a coalition frigate. Their multiple heads tracked, constantly, monitoring hundreds of different biochemical processes simultaneously. But the most disturbing thing was how they reacted to the team's presence. They weren't surprised. They had been waiting. "Welcome," came a voice that wasn't quite sound, transmitted through bioacoustic manipulation of the chamber's atmosphere. "We have been observing your progress through our facility." One of the Prime Queens moved closer to their position, her multiple eyes focused on the team with obvious intelligence. "Your species is unknown to us. Your tactics are innovative. We are curious about your capabilities." Captain Park stepped forward. Velthara wanted to grab him and drag him back, but something in his posture stopped her. He wasn't approaching as a supplicant or even as an enemy. He was approaching as an equal. "We're here to eliminate this breeding facility," he said calmly. "Yes," the Prime Queen replied. "We assumed that was your intention. We have prepared accordingly." The chamber began to change. Walls shifted to reveal hidden passages. The floor rippled as new structures emerged from beneath. The eggs began to glow brighter, and Velthara realized they weren't dormant. They were nearly ready to hatch. "Your species has shown us new forms of warfare," the Prime Queen continued. "Adaptive tactics, biological manipulation, psychological, warfare through audio coordination. We have incorporated these concepts into our next generation." Dr. Song was taking readings frantically. "Captain, the biochemistry in this chamber is changing. They're releasing compounds I don't recognize." "Evolutionary accelerants," the Prime Queen explained helpfully. "We are completing a breeding cycle that would normally require several months. Your arrival has provided the necessary stimulus." Sergeant Kim looked at his tactical display. "Sir, we're seeing massive movement throughout the hive. Everything is converging on this position." "Yes," the Prime Queen said. "Our new generation will test themselves against the tactics you have demonstrated. It will be educational." Velthara felt terror like nothing she had ever experienced. The Prime Queens hadn't just been breeding more drones. They had been creating countermeasures specifically designed to defeat human tactics. They had studied every move the team made, analyzed every innovation, and bred solutions. The humans were about to face enemies designed specifically to kill them. "Captain." Park was quiet for a long moment processing this information. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something Velthara had never heard from him before. Anticipation. "Interesting," he said. "We've never fought an enemy that could adapt to our methods this quickly." "It should be an excellent test," the Prime Queen agreed. "Yes," Park replied. "It should be." Velthara stared at him. The humans weren't horrified by this development. They weren't even concerned. They were excited. They had found worthy opponents at last. The chamber erupted into motion as thousands of newly hatched creatures emerged from their eggs. These weren't standard Vex-High drones. They moved with coordinated intelligence. Their carapaces showed adaptations designed to deflect kinetic weapons. Their biosensors were configured to detect human pheromones and movement patterns. They had been bred specifically to kill the team, and the humans couldn't wait to see if it would work. The newly bred Vex-High creatures that emerged from the eggs were unlike anything the Coalition had encountered. They moved with intelligence and coordination that surpassed even Queen-level specimens. Their carapaces had been adapted specifically to counter human weapons. Their biosensors were tuned to detect human biochemistry. Their behavioral patterns had been modified to resist the psychological tactics the team had used throughout the hive. They were the perfect anti-human weapon, designed by creatures who had observed and analyzed every human innovation during the mission. Captain Park studied them for approximately 5 seconds. Then he turned to his team and spoke in the same calm tone he had used for routine tactical decisions. "New parameters," he said. "Standard approaches won't work. Time to innovate." What happened next was beyond anything Velthara had thought possible. Instead of being dismayed by enemies designed to counter their tactics, the humans treated this as the most interesting challenge they had ever encountered. Dr. Song immediately began synthesizing new compounds from the chamber's biochemical resources. "If they've adapted to our previous biological weapons, we need completely different approaches," he said while mixing substances that shouldn't have been combinable. Let's see how they handle toxins derived from their own evolutionary accelerants. Sergeant Kim was examining the specialized carapaces of the new drones. Kinetic resistance, but they had to sacrifice mobility for armor thickness, he observed while placing explosives in new configurations. We change our targeting priorities and attack patterns. Specialist Lee was analyzing their communication methods. They've shielded themselves against our previous jamming frequencies, but the shielding creates new vulnerabilities, she reported while reprogramming her equipment. I can exploit the interference patterns. Private Choi was testing how the new drones responded to various stimuli. They're expecting us to use the same psychological warfare techniques, he said, while his wounded leg barely supported him. So, we use different ones. They were adapting their methods faster than their enemies could process the changes. The first assault came from 12 prime queens attacking simultaneously. Each one directed thousands of specially bred drones in complex, tactical maneuvers that should have overwhelmed any ground force. They had studied human coordination methods and developed counter-strategies for every technique the team had demonstrated. The humans responded by abandoning every technique they had used before and inventing entirely new ones. Dr. Song released aerosol compounds that didn't attack the drone's biology directly. Instead, they interfered with the evolutionary accelerants still present in the chamber's atmosphere. Drones that had been perfectly adapted for anti-human warfare began experiencing random mutations that made them less effective against any targets. Sergeant Kim stopped using explosives to kill enemies directly. Instead, he used them to reshape the chamber's structure, creating new terrain that the drones hadn't been programmed to navigate. Their perfect tactical coordination became a liability when the battlefield kept changing. Specialist Lee abandoned jamming their communications and began feeding them false information instead. She convinced entire groups of drones that their allies were enemies. She made them believe the Prime Queens were under attack from directions where no threats existed. Private Choi had discovered something that made Velthara's blood freeze with terror. The specially bred drones were designed to resist human psychological warfare, but they had no defenses against psychological warfare directed at their creators. He began targeting the Prime Queens with tactics designed to induce fear. The massive creatures had never experienced fear. They had been the apex predators of known space for millennia. Nothing had ever threatened them successfully. The concept of personal vulnerability was foreign to their psychology. Choi systematically destroyed their sense of invulnerability. He used precision attacks to damage non-vital systems, demonstrating that he could hurt them whenever he chose. He eliminated their defenders in ways that showed complete understanding of their capabilities. He made them realize they were not facing desperate prey fighting for survival. They were being hunted by something that considered them a challenge to be overcome. For the first time in their evolutionary history, the Prime Queens began to experience genuine terror. Captain Park was conducting the entire battle like a conductor directing an orchestra. But he wasn't giving detailed orders. He was providing a framework that allowed each team member to innovate within their area of expertise. When Song developed a new biological weapon, Park immediately understood how to integrate it with Kim's explosive tactics and Lee's information warfare. The humans had become something beyond a military unit. They were a single organism with multiple, specialized components all focused on the art of adaptive warfare. How is this possible? Velthara asked Dr. Song during a brief pause in the fighting. You're innovating tactics faster than they can respond. This level of adaptation should take months of analysis and training. Song smiled while treating wounds that should have been fatal but somehow weren't slowing him down. Human warfare. Evolution doesn't happen in training camps, he said. It happens in real time under pressure when failure means death. We've been doing this for 300,000 years. Doing what? Learning to kill things that were designed to kill us. The battle continued for what felt like hours. Wave after wave of specially adapted enemies attacked their position. The humans killed them all, but more importantly, they learned from each encounter and developed new methods for the next wave. The Prime Queens began to realize they had made a fundamental error in their analysis of human capabilities. They had assumed human innovation was limited by their existing knowledge and equipment. They had bred countermeasures for specific tactics and weapons. But humans didn't just use tactics and weapons. They created them. When conventional explosives became ineffective, Kim learned to weaponize the chamber's own bioluminescent systems. When standard biological agents were resisted, Song synthesized entirely new categories of toxins. When normal, communication jamming was blocked, Lee invented forms of information warfare that had never existed before. The specially bred drones had been designed to counter the humans who had entered the hive. They were useless against the humans those same creatures had become during the fighting. In the final phase of the battle, something unprecedented happened. The largest of the Prime Queens, a creature that had lived for thousands of years and had never shown anything resembling emotion, spoke directly to Captain Park. "What are you?" she asked, and her bioacoustic voice carried something Velthara had never heard from a Vexhi before: fear, pure, undiluted terror. Park looked up at the massive creature that could have crushed him with a casual movement. "We're problem solvers," he said calmly. "And you're a very interesting problem." The Prime Queen stared at him with her multiple eyes. "We have adapted our forces specifically to counter your capabilities. We have bred the perfect weapons to destroy you. Yet you continue to find new ways to kill us. This should not be possible." "You adapted to what we were," Park explained while placing a device that would shortly end the creature's existence. "But we adapted to what you became. That's the difference between evolution and innovation." "We do not understand." "You will," Park said, activating the device. The neural disruptor that had worked on the smaller queen was merely the prototype. The version Park attached to the Prime Queen was far more sophisticated, based on everything Dr. Song had learned about Vexhi neural architecture during the fighting. The massive creature's multiple eyes went unfocused. Her complex thought processes became simple. The thousands of drones under her command stopped receiving coordinated orders and began attacking randomly. One by one, the other Prime Queens fell to similar tactics. Each required a different approach, because each had tried to adapt to the methods used on her predecessors. The humans accommodated this by inventing new solutions in real time. When the last Prime Queen was dead and the chamber fell silent, Velthara found herself staring at her human teammates with something approaching terror. They had just accomplished the impossible. They had defeated enemies specifically designed to kill them, using methods they had invented during the battle. They had turned what should have been certain death into a tactical exercise, and they had done it while remaining completely, unnaturally calm. "Seismic charges are still in place," Sergeant Kim reported. "Ready for detonation on your command." "Medical. Supplies are exhausted, but everyone is functional," Dr. Song added. "All enemy communications are down. No distress signals have been transmitted," Specialist Lee confirmed. "Ready to proceed to extraction point," Private Choi said, despite injuries that should have prevented him from walking. Captain Park nodded and activated the detonation sequence. "All teams move to extraction point. We have 30 seconds before this place becomes uninhabitable." As they ran through the collapsing hive, Velthara realized she would never think about warfare the same way again. She had witnessed something that would change military thinking across the galaxy. The humans didn't just win battles. They evolved the art of warfare itself, in real time, under the worst possible conditions,